Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2, Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low Magazine? Because 4Low Magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Conversations with Big Rich. Today's guest is going to be Kyle Knosp. He is the owner and operator of Attica, Indiana's Badlands Off-Road Park. Prior to taking over Badlands as the new owner, Kyle had opened and operated a park in eastern Pennsylvania called Paragon. Let's talk to Kyle about the history of four-wheel drive for him and what it's like to start and open up parks and then run them. Maybe we can get some insight on what it will take to create a park in the future. All right, Kyle Knosp, how good is it to be seeing you again? It's been a while. Thank you for joining us here on this podcast and talking about the history of Paragon and Badlands and what you're doing and what you plan on doing. So let's get started and ask the simple question. How have you been? Where did you start off at in off-road?
I'm doing really good. We're in midst right now, these crazy times of this COVID thing. So that's a little wild. And definitely when I first started this stuff way back when, would never have anticipated the things that we're facing today. And so that's always a crazy challenge. But started this, probably 25 years or so. Started when I was 16. Kind of before that, my family's always loved Jeeps and things like that, but really started when I was about 15, 16. Went wheeling with one of my buddies for the first time. Was just like instantly hooked. Loved it, back in the Jeep days. And I always joke with people because, like, I remembered when like a 31-inch tire was like, holy moly, I'm putting a 31-inch tire. Now you got UTVs with, 35s and stuff like that. So it's crazy. But yeah, back in the Jeep days. And that was really cool. We went on, trail rides with the local club. It was Blue Mountain Jeep Alliance. I'll never forget that, back in Pennsylvania. So that was crazy. I'm in Indiana now, so however many states away, but grew up in Pennsylvania, grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Everybody always likes to joke about that as being Amish country. I didn't drive a buggy. I had a Jeep, and that was my first vehicle, and just started wheeling, and with the camaraderie of like the clubs and Jeep Jamboree and things like that, just instantly got hooked. And well, here I am, less hair, grayer hair, and still doing it.
So your first vehicle then was a Jeep or four-wheel drive, or did you start with something else?
No, it was a Jeep. I want to say it was a 91, 92 Jeep Sahara. Was my first Jeep, bone stock. And then, I was younger. So I started when I was 16. I worked 2 jobs after school and all that stuff. And, when I was in high school, I was doing I was a bus boy and stuff like that to get cash. And every dollar I had, I was buying lift kit, tires. I remember Lock-Right lockers. I was saved up. I think it was like $200, and it was like saved up to put a locker in. And oh yeah, that was my thing. And I'd work every evening, after school, and then, after I get out of school, I'd work, a normal job, and I'd work evening jobs. And then I started just, every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'd be heading up to the mountains. It was about probably an hour and a half, 2 hour drive to where we used to wheel. Did that every weekend and then restart Monday morning and just kept doing it. And then it was kind of, Jeep Jamboree is kind of where I got started kind of doing it as a little more professional and getting that kind of teaching other people to do it. So, the first couple of years it was me learning, and then the next transition was from being taught to teaching. And that kind of is where it transitioned a lot of my career. There was a park that we used to do. Back then, there wasn't like, East Coast, there wasn't really off-road parks. Back then, that was kind of just in the transition of that like pay to ride thing. But there was a lot of like old strip mines and stuff like that we used to ride on. But man, I want to say it was probably like 90, probably know the stats, but probably like late 90s, early 2000s was, there's an off-road park called Paragon. And I kind of transitioned into the Jeep Club. The person that owned that park had asked a lot of clubs to come up and start helping cutting trails. I mean, it was a completely bare property except for a few access points. So long story short, at that point, I kind of transitioned into being able to like design trails and things like that, and started working with the original owner of that place. Because really it wasn't even off the ground. It was just a concept for him. And he really is the one that came up with it back that way. But I helped him get that started and worked with him, and inevitably kind of transitioned into like what I'll call the real job, into working for him. And that was kind of a big step, at that point, I was in a relationship. I didn't have a baby yet on the way, but that wasn't too far after. So we moved about 2.5 hours to the off-road park, where the off-road park was. So that was a change and all that. And long story short, the original owner of that didn't have really a lot of luck with that. And then it basically came up for sale back in, I want to say it was 2002. I purchased the park from him, and that's like is this like a soap opera? Is that what we're trying to do? Because that was crazy. That we had a couple of good years of running that, but at the end of that, there was I was involved. So basically, it was a lease of the land, and I was kind of involved in this. It was on TV. A lot of people got in trouble. I don't know what I'd exactly call it, but it was kind of a land grab, and it wasn't really illegal what they were doing at the time. And we were fighting back and forth through the courts and all that kind of stuff. But long story short, we were just. I always remember this. I think it was Aaron Brockovich movie with what's her name, Roberts. Anyway,
Yeah.
They had a cart full of paperwork. The lawyer brought in, and we were just. I always remember that because that's what it was like. I mean, if we produced a stack of paperwork like this, they were like this. We were just outgunned and underprepared, and we inevitably lost the case. And so I went back to the real world there for a little while and had a real job, and that was probably about 1.5 years, and really never stopped trying to start another off-road park and try to get things going again. Back in Pennsylvania, I looked down in Virginia, just all over. I'm a man of faith, heavily, and I believe God always has a plan. And well, our days back, you remember, you helped me put on, and I helped you put on my first rock crawling event.
Yes. Bob Rogie and I came out.
Yeah.
And we put on that first New Rock event and helped train your judges and show you and little Kyle the, how we did things. And I remember I believe it was a red or orange Jeep that you had at the time.
Yeah, Mango.
Yeah.
It was
okay.
right in the middle. You're right. Yep.
And it only had a B-pillar hoop.
Uh-huh.
And it was like, okay, we want to drive off of these ledges and test everything. And Rogie was like, oh, I ain't driving that thing. It's not got a cage, So you got in there. I was hanging on the back with a strap a couple of times. And we guided you off some of the rocks just to get used to it. And I remember saying, if you're going to have a park, you need a full cage.
Yeah. Well, what was crazy was a few months before that, so my buddy Charlie Melchner, he
Right.
was my link into what I would call hardcore wheeling. And he had gone out the year before to one of the events out west and did real well. And I had linked up with him through Paragon, and heck, that was before I owned it, none of that. And then we went to the Super Crawl. I want to say it was in New Mexico, if I remember right at that point. Could be wrong. I was a little long. I've slept a few times since then. But man, yeah, that was where, I think I remember one of the first times was when I saw Tiny for the first time. It was the first moon buggy, or at least what I remember to be the first moon buggy, Volkswagen powered, like, holy moly. And I remember when people didn't even have, like, out there, you guys don't have rust and stuff like that. It was all like bare metal. And I was like, holy moly. And back here, we were still, like, there really wasn't anybody bobbing Jeeps or none of that kind of stuff yet. It was all, full bodied vehicles. And we got into 40s and 44s, but they were all boggers and swampers and stuff like that. There was no crawlers back then, or that was the first part of crawlers. So that was crazy. But yeah, and Charlie and I, we went out there, we competed, and just kind of opened my eyes. And we were there at Paragon, and you said little Kyle, Kyle Buchter, he was, we would crawl all over this hillside. And inevitably, we took a backhoe and started digging rocks out. And then that's when, I think that was the year after you came, we just got hooked on this. We did the event. And I remember when I first started with you, man, we had nothing. That was like, I basically put that event on with my credit cards to make it happen. Like, because the owner at the park, because again, I wasn't the owner at that time, he wanted no part of this. Thought it was dumb. And I'm like, you're missing the boat. And E-Rock, if I remember right, I think they were 2 or 3 events ahead of us, and they had some big momentum at that time. And I'm like, man, you are missing out. And he's like, hey, you want to pay for the event, take the chance, then you do it. And I was like, done. And I believed in it, and it was really cool. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, those early days, it was a lot of trial and error and just trying to figure things out. I started off by working with Ranch Pratt at Arca and learning what he was doing, and then watching Bob Hazel with Pro Rock. U-Rock got started the same time I did. E-Rock was going on, and it was pretty interesting. I remember the guys at E-Rock got all upset with us because we had set a date that was on top of one of their events, and we had no clue that we were on top of them. And it was like, I remember they got really upset, and they didn't even want me. I showed up later down there to put an event on, and they were trying to keep me from going in there because we had set up that first date. But that was all with the buddy of mine that was the go-between between you and I, Dave Burling, and setting the date and everything. And I think he was, U-Rock and E-Rock were starting to work together with Craig Stump and whoever it was that was running E-Rock. I can't remember their names. And then Dave was mad at Craig. So he was the one that said the date, and then we published it, and we did everything we could, to make it fit in with what else I was doing. And then those guys got mad down there, and it was like, oh, well, go and do what people will go where they want, but it all worked out for everybody.
Yeah, it did. And man, later, and that was what was so cool about rock crawling, then. And I I'm not out west, like I used to be, but I would assume it seems like when I'm watching stuff, and it seems like that camaraderie starting to get back, and it was, later, Daryl and Tim, and I can't remember all the guys in E-Rock, but like I still see Daryl coming. He comes to the park here every so often. Daryl Motley,
that's right.
He does cross country dirt bike racing. Still, he's a wild man. But yeah, through the years, like I remember sitting down and talking through rules, and you were there, and we were doing, wasn't it Patey's were the ones that had U-Rock later in the years?
Yes.
Yeah, dude, like it was just so crazy to see how, and I will say that's the cool part about, off-roading is it's such a tight-knit group, and especially I'm not criticizing UTVs in any way. I mean, I love UTVs, have one, sell them, the whole 9 yards, no criticism. But there is a difference between like that rock crawling and jeeping kind of group. They're more tight knit, and like I had one of the guys, like the world. We'll talk about that later. But so many different, like how small the world truly is, but rock crawling and just how much like we still talk about years ago, and like the pranks and the jokes and all the stuff. Not only about the rock crawling, but the life around it was how awesome it was. It was such a cool time to be involved in that.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that people are still embedded in the community as enthusiasts or business owners. Myself, 2001 was my first event. 2002 was my first series, but I was working with Ranch in 99 when he put the first event on in Cedar City. As the club president, I helped him get in there, helped him with volunteers and that kind of thing. They've moved on. The Paties are doing other things. Ranch is now starting something up in off-road. But Randy Crucy and Shane Chapman that started the park here in Texas, K2, they're from that same time period, 2000. There's a few of us that are still around, but not a whole lot of them. Cody Wagner's back into competing, Jesse Haynes, but he showed up probably around 2004, I think it was, when he started competing, at least with us. It's interesting to see the people that have stuck with it, made a lifestyle out of it, which is, to me, was what it was all about, was just wanting to live the lifestyle.
Yeah. It was crazy. Like my girl's mom, she was going through a photo album, and she dug out a picture and gave me, it was for a holiday. And it was my girl's, like, it was actually my oldest, but at that time, she was just, pipsqueak, and I was wrenching underneath my Jeep, and she's laying beside me on a creeper with just her feet hanging out, and to think we just about a week ago put a lift kit on her JK, and, to see her go from that and evolve. And we were sitting there and we were watching, we had a crazy event at the park. We were so busy. We were sitting at the couch, and she's like, Daddy. And my other daughter, they're like, we don't do anything inside. Everything we do is outside, and it was crazy. They worked a probably 10-hour day this weekend, and what my daughters wanted to do was go riding afterwards. And I was like, I almost brought a tear to my eye to see like that. It was so awesome.
It's nice to see that the traditions continue. There's a lot of families that have been brought up in off-road community. Little Charlie is now, wheeling, and his daughter is wheeling, and my son is running an event in southern Utah. It's just so cool to see it, keep going and not just dissipate and disappear. So
evolution.
Yeah,
it's just
absolutely. So let's talk about some of the issues that you see in being a park owner or creating parks. I know that there's people out there right now, especially farther in along the eastern seaboard, through Virginia and all the way down to Georgia and all the way up into Maine and New Hampshire, that are trying to open up parks. You've been around as a park owner as long as anybody. So, what would be your recommendation if somebody found a piece of property? First, how do you find a piece of property? And then what are the steps to take if somebody wanted to try to open a park?
I mean, that's a great question. And there's not one answer that, fits in the box, but I mean, everything is different for each person and their passion. So, I mean, you have the business model that you want to use, and you have the terrain model that you want to use, and they're not always the same. And you've set courses and stuff like that, so keeping an open mind on what you have to work with. I mean, part of any business is, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And so much of my career, and one, I've been blessed, and God has blessed me with people, opportunity, and I always joke. There's this little quick joke. There's this woman, right? And the things are flooding, and she comes and she goes, they're starting evacuating the town. And she's like, well, I'm not going to evacuate. God's going to save me. Well, okay, no problem. So they go on and, ma'am, are you sure? And, all right, so the water starts to rise, and then a canoe comes along. And then, ma'am, come on, get in the boat. You know, the water's flooding. We got to evacuate. No, God will save me. And keeps going long, keeps flooding. And then she's on the roof, and a helicopter comes. And you're like, and they're like, come on, man, get in the helicopter. Let's go. We want to save you. God will save me. Well, water keeps rising. She goes off and gets drowned. She drowns, and she's off in heaven. And God looks, and she looks at God, and she says, why didn't you save me, God? He goes, I tried. I sent you people. I sent you canoe. I sent you helicopter. So the moral of that story is, like, there's so much adversity, and through the years, like, just craziness. So, you know, risk and liability is a huge thing. So you're always battling that. And that's, you know, it's like we talked about the COVID thing right now. There is no way any of us would have anticipated this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, probably 2 months ago. So being able to adapt is the biggest thing. So as you know, like in your career and through your times, you probably learned more from the things that went wrong than the things that went right.
Absolutely.
I think that a lot of times when you start a project like this, you need to have that just fighting adversity and overcoming challenges, because it doesn't matter if it's property, it doesn't matter if it's weather, it could be the economy. How do you best adapt yourself? What's your business plan? Like my big thing has been morals. Like I've always wanted to have a family park. So through my big thing, you know, my life cycle, that was one thing that always stayed constant. I have 2 daughters, and I wanted them to be able to go to any event so that I put on or was involved in. I wanted them to be able to go to any event. So what that did was that checked safety, because I wouldn't want to put them in an area that they wouldn't be safe. It would be something that's family oriented, because, you know, they're my kids, and that's not everybody's model, obviously, but that was always important to me. And I really think that was kind of like the basis through the years. The advice I'd give, you asked a question about property. Obviously, you can build things, but you know, what is there existing? Seeing that kind of block of clay and what someone can do with it is important, because you know, people, I think, in my personal opinion, a lot of people put things in the wrong orders. Okay, so geographics and competition is always important. Okay, so if you had a 100,000 acre park and you're going to put a 500 acre park beside it, well, what are you going to do different? Because they've got a leg up, you know, and it doesn't mean you're out of the game. I mean, you could think of something different. I mean, there's all kinds of businesses, but there's a lot of like that, those kind of challenges. So this April, I took over the Badlands Off-Road Park. I bought that from Troy and Lisa Myers. And there's a cool, funny story about that, and we'll come back to that. But like when I got that, it was an existing park. We were in a downward economy. I knew that I had some challenges ahead of me. There's a lot of other parks. There's a lot of competition. It was an existing park, so you know, I knew it was not going to be easy. So kind of one of the things that I decided was I can't make someone buy a four-wheeler. Jeep, none of that. That's what they have to decide on their choice. I can provide them a place to ride, okay? But how do I increase my pie? So one of my biggest things was is exposing myself to more people. So like an example, you know, we talk about rock crawling, and, you know, well, that's this group of people. Okay. Well, how big is that group of people? All right. And then you might do, you know, we'll call Jeep Jamboree or easy stuff or whatever you want to, and I don't mean to associate Jeep Jamboree with easy, but it's a different client. Okay. And, you know, they have expectations. So picking whatever model or whatever group you want to go after is very important. And what I was trying to do was figure out how I could get the biggest group possible. And kind of one of my dreams is I've always respected Walt Disney. I've read a lot of his books and the way he does things, and he's a great person for I think of actually modeling off-road parks because of Disney World. You know, size is a big thing, so he went out there in California and, you know, built this park. You know, it was an amusement park, but he learned size. He did the best he could, and everybody built around him. And then he said, well, I'm never going to have that happen again. So he went down to Florida and got all this ground before, and there's a long story behind that. But like, that's kind of where I've always modeled stuff off of. So like through the years, one of our first steps was renting units. Okay. So not everybody can buy units and things, but they still may have an interest, or they may have, they want to just sample it, and see if they're going to like it. So renting was a huge thing for us that, I had everybody that has a vehicle, and we did our best to accommodate them. So then what we would try to move in is rentals. And then we came to figure out, well, the big thing is, you have wives and you have kids, and, it's more than just a bunch of guys sitting around a campfire a lot of times, and people are getting into families, and like, Jeep and a JK is totally different than what the Willys started out. They're not the same model of who was buying them. And so we got into housing and things like that. So kind of our whole thing was to kind of hit like a more of a tourist, more people, more creature features, amenities, and felt that was where kind of the industry was heading. And that's kind of what we've done over the last 12 years, and moved into that kind of market.
So I know that out at the Badlands that there's a RV park that's next door, or on the way in, but that's not something that you own, or did you finally purchase that?
We have purchased that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there was the building out front, which I know that you ended up with. And then have you put cabins or anything out at the park, or I know that you were interested in the hotel at one time. There was a hotel available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So where have you gone with that?
So, so we have the Badlands, and then we had the campground, as you said. So, we bought the campground. Actually, so there was a dealership. There was a Polaris dealership that was at the front of our dealership. It was actually there before the off-road park, and then the off-road park became behind it. There was some animosity over the years between the two owners at that time, and long story short, the economy had kind of went down a little bit, and the owners of the dealership had gone through some tough times. So we purchased that and worked with Polaris to get that dealership up and going again. And so that's been very good for us. We basically took a dealership from the worst dealership in the state to the highest volume dealership in the state. So that was pretty cool. And right after that, we worked for a few years to be able to buy out the campground owner. And then we amongst this, we were starting vacation houses. So we started in and we built several and have bought several. So you asked about the hotel. I did look at that. And one of the things that I think we're all getting softer in our older age. And one of the big things is convenience. The town, I've worked really hard with the town, and we have a great administration in our town, and I appreciate them, and I think it's likewise, and they do a lot with us. But having all those vehicles, so one of the biggest things is, as I was joking about, get soft, is people don't want to load up. So once a vehicle's on a trailer, another 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I mean, it's not that big a deal. It might be a restaurant they like, or a hotel they like, or whatever. So you kind of lose that, and it loses that multi-day where, you put your hunkers down and you're there and it's a vacation. So what we kind of modeled was everything that we do is trail access. So once you're here, you flip the tailgate down and you unload or do whatever you're doing. You do not have to go in the real world if you don't want to. And that's been kind of our model and what we do. And then we've worked with the town, and they've been very gracious that, so they work so we can drive the UTVs in town to the restaurants. And so we just got that passed. We were really going to kind of push that real heavy this year. It's about 2 years in the making, but this COVID thing is definitely, obviously there's no restaurants open to be able to go to, so that's been a struggle. But once things kind of simmer down and life gets back to, what I call somewhat normal, that's our goal. So there's that more open town feel transition.
Excellent. Good to hear that. How did you come about with Troy Myers and getting the Badlands? Because when all that happened, when it was all announced, I was like, whoa, didn't see that one coming. I thought it was a great move for you. So how did that all work out?
So that's a crazy story. It all relates back to rock crawling. So met Troy through rock crawling, all the different events we were out there, and we talk about that camaraderie and building that relationship, and that's exactly what happened. And I had talked with him. So while we were rock crawling, I had Paragon, and we were putting events on, and he would come to the events, and we'd go out west to events. And long story short, we just built a relationship, and he'd call me up and be like, hey, well, I got a question at the park, about the park, and we would just build a professional relationship. He had a park, I had a park. We loved rock crawling, but he was in Indiana and I'm in Pennsylvania, and so then my saga happened back at Paragon, and that was, obviously tough. Went back to the real world. Crazy story. I was sitting on I was actually carrying trash to a dumpster just at the end of the day, and I get this phone call on my phone, and it's Troy Myers. He says, hey, you still trying to get in the off-road park business? I said, well, yeah. And he goes, well, I'm selling one. And I said, Troy, I don't have that kind of money. He goes, that's not what I asked you. and he said, get your butt out here and let's sit down and talk. And I would never have been able to been, like, I can't say the respect that I have for him and his family, because we wouldn't be able to do the things that we do if Troy didn't take a chance on me back and my family back then. And, Troy and Lisa both, and so that whole thing, it was a big risk, and I had a good, I was going back into what I would call real career, and I was, I could make good money at that. And I remember one of my buddies, Steve Risk, we were sitting there, and I was talking to him on my phone, and I was sitting on the back of a truck and like kind of looking at a cornfield. We were doing a job, and my legs, I was sitting there swinging my legs, and we were talking, and I said, man, I don't know what to do. This is a big risk, and moving my family and moving from Pennsylvania, it's like about 14 hours from house to house. And he said, well, let me make it real simple for you. Are you going to be happy sitting in the back of that truck, swinging your legs for the rest of your life? Or are you going to be more happy being back in the off-road industry? I said, well, that's an easy choice. And he goes, well, there you go. And and from that day forward, just never looked back and just kept pushing.
When I moved back to California and put on my first event, Put Up or Shut Up, Cow Rocks, I was working for a large automotive parts retailer as a manager. I remember I was there just over 1 year, had just put on the event and realized that's what I wanted to do. At that point, I didn't like myself. I didn't like anybody. I mean, I just hated life. I hated myself. I hated everybody. Put that event on. I finally felt that I knew what I wanted to do. So I walked into the store, and that same day, district manager and the loss prevention manager show up, and I was like, great, you're here. Why? And I'd had a run-in with a customer earlier in the week, so I figured they were coming in to chastise me for that. I took somebody that was yelling and escorted them out of the building, you might say, and told them never to come back in. And they came in, and and I'm like, okay, what are you here for? They go, well, we're here to give you your 1 year pin. And I was like, really? I've been here that long? And I said, you made some promises a year ago when I came to work here, and none of those promises have come true. So I dug my keys out of the pocket. I set them on the desk, and I said, here's your store back. I'm leaving. I'm walking out right now. The district manager, who happened to be a female, she goes, well, you can't do that. And I said, did I sign something that I don't know about? And she goes, no, it's just, we're paying you awfully well as a store manager. Just give us a little more time and we'll get you to what we promised. And I said, no, it's too late. I grabbed my personal stuff and walked out the door, and left them sitting there going, what? Because I know I would never need them for, any kind of a work reference or anything like that, because I knew what I was going to do, and it was continue putting on events.
Yeah.
So it makes a big difference.
It is. It's crazy. And I encourage anyone to follow their dreams, and no matter what part of life that they're in, and that's thing. And, you always hear that thing about, if you enjoy what you do, you never work a day of your life. Well, that's not true, because I've worked some hard days. I know you have, but I mean, it does when you lay your head down at night and you feel that you're on the right track where you're supposed to be. There's no better satisfaction than that.
Yeah. And I think that you never work another day in your life. What it means is that you've now created a lifestyle. So you may work for that lifestyle, but you're not working in the same capacity you did when you worked for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have somebody with their thumb on you telling you this is what you have to do. These are the hours you have to work, whatever. You get to make call those shots on your own. And I think that takes it away from the work. I mean, yeah, there's physical work and there's mental work, but it's not the same as having that thumb on you.
I agree. And part of being a leader, so we have 4 businesses that's here at the Badlands, and they're getting, pretty large for what they are. And so, our staff has grown from, 3-4 people when I first started to, I think we're close to 30. And, so some of the things that, it's cool because I had a kid that started with me when he was 14 years old. And my girls look at him as like a brother, and he's the longest one. And just to see like him being able to buy a nice truck and a razor and all the things that, and to see that transition and so we've hired, we're getting a lot of good talent. That's kind of what our big focus is now, is trying to find good talent. And, so I have other people that we work with, and part of our senior staff, that what we look for is I give 3 main rules. Okay. And one of those is risk management, and that's part of any business, but in some businesses it's more than others. So risk management. But then the next part is business morals. So if you operate your business with business morals, okay, that means you're not out to screw anybody or, do anything negative or, good ethics. Okay. Well, then that will carry through. And then family morals and ethics. So if you operate those 3 things in your business, I mean, it's obviously you need other ingredients, but it's a great, because that building, like for us, building that family, that's an important thing. I'm horsing around with people. I'm doing every job that's here. I'm not better than anybody. We're a team, and it's that produces. So it's like you said about the environment and how about working. And it's a very good point. And that's kind of like what I try to push down all the way through is, so that not everybody gets the ability to have their own business, but I want everybody to feel like it is their business and they're part of something bigger.
Yeah. If they have, if employees are, have some kind of buy-in and are felt, have the feeling that they're part of the family, it goes a long ways. It really does. That's one of the things that we've lost with corporate America as it is now. There's no loyalty to employees. There's no employee loyalty to the corporation. Everybody's in it for a buck.
Mm-hmm.
And, what can they get out of that situation? Where, with the small businesses, it's more like, what can we do to help everybody? Raising the tide raises the whole, all the boats,
Yep.
That kind of thing. And I really believe that our industry, the off-road industry, does that very well. You can see that by the people that stay in the industry and never leave. They may change their business card on who they're working for,
Yep.
but they always, there's so many of them that just stay in the business. And then eventually, they figure it out and they become business owners themselves, or, end up with a racing program or, something beyond, and like with me, I've tried to build a full circle. We do the events. Now we have the magazine and now the podcast, and it's all about how we can serve our community better. The podcast is about bringing in the history to people that, those JK owners have no idea what you and Charlie went through back in the early 2000s. They have no idea.
Yeah.
They have no idea what it was like to go on the Rubicon and not see another vehicle for 4 or 5 days over a long weekend.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing when we find those people to be able to help teach them what it's all about, whether it's trail etiquette or land use issues. But, when they get started, everybody goes, oh, those newbies, they don't know what they're doing. And the same thing with like UTV drivers. We see it out here, in Moab and other places where, the people that have moved from Jeeps to UTVs have gone, they are even frustrated with the new UTV owners because they just go anywhere.
Yep.
They feel, oh, I got a vehicle, I can go off-road, and they go everywhere. They don't stick to the trails. In the West, especially, or even some of the parks here in Texas, it's very important that, people follow those etiquettes and those rules. Otherwise, we end up losing more. Like here, there's so many parks that the UTVs are just shut out. The 2 parks here in Texas that I'm at, Mason, they don't allow UTVs, quads, or motorcycles. It's only Jeeps or trucks, things like that, or buggies, but no UTVs.
And it is a shame. Like, I don't know that I could pinpoint, the reasoning and why people are that way. But like I had a kid who, obviously the generations are different, and what your parents and forefathers and mine and all that, what all of it, they're all different, through the years and even within the years they're different. But like I had a crazy story this about 2 weekends ago. I had this, so we follow, like, you're not allowed to run double on a 4-wheeler. You have to have a helmet on. So I come across this kid who's got a girl on the back of his 4-wheeler, no helmet. And I'm like, and I've got a razor that says park staff in like huge letters. Like there's no, I don't know who you are. And I'm telling this, like I'm up beside him telling him stop. And the kid keeps going and running from me. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I didn't know who you are. I'm like, really? And it's funny because he drove back, got the woman off the back of his vehicle. And I'm like, well, if you couldn't hear me, then how did you know exactly what you were doing wrong? And, I'm like, it's like pre-programmed into him to run. And like, it makes such it hurts our industry so bad when that mentality is almost bred into groups or user groups. And go ahead.
It is. Yeah, and I think it is a generational thing. And I don't know where we lost that. There's a lot of disrespect nowadays, especially for the younger generations that are, the ones younger than us. They don't look at older people like me now as having some authority. So if you tell somebody, hey, you're doing something wrong, knock that off, they either tell you to, take a flying leap or they want to fight or something.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that we've raised so many of the generations below us to be disrespectful. You see it everywhere in society, not just.
And you're right. It's a shame. And like I look back and, all the way back when I was 16, the part of the Jeeping that I always respect and I don't mean to specify Jeep, but that's just what I did. And, that wheeling group,
right.
You had people that had been in it that would teach you the way, and we'll call it the do's and don'ts. And, you took a stock Jeep or a reasonably stock Jeep, you'd get stuck. You almost had to listen to people because you learned how to drive. The vehicle was so less capable, and now, like you've got, so you take like a Rubicon that's got lockers front and back and forth. I mean, we used to have to build that. Now you can have a user that's just, that vehicle, it outdrives them, at the beginning, as far as beginner. And it gets them in places and without the infrastructure, the kind of backbone of the morals and the do's and don'ts. And then you take a UTV, I mean, those things are ridiculous. Like I look at the stuff that even my daughters and stuff we're climbing, is crazy. And like you probably remember, like, and I would say the evolution of wheeling when we got into rock buggies and all this stuff. The stuff we had to do to get a thrill, I'll call it, was climbing vertical walls and dropping off a 15-foot cliff. I mean, the level had just progressed. And then when I'll speak personally, like we get a stock Jeep and we're like having as much fun as like a complete rock crawler because you can't do all this stuff. But, like kind of the fun of that, like you look at a UTV now, they're just so capable, so fast. I mean, they can do anything, almost go anywhere, more than a normal vehicle. And now you put someone who simply doesn't know any better, it's not always the best thing for the sport.
Yeah, I agree. I think the parks here, why they've decided not to have UTVs and quads is because the Jeepers the guys normally in Jeeps or Toyota pickups or buggies will follow the signs and say, okay, this is where you start the trail. This is where the trail ends. And if they do meet somebody coming the other way, nobody's going more than a crawl.
Yeah.
The UTVs, they're fast. And that's part of that whole lifestyle at the UTVs is that people are, whipping around corners, and who's coming around the corner the other way, whipping around.
Yeah.
And at least with the UTV, you have cages, and as long as they're actually wearing their harnesses like they're supposed to, and hopefully have a helmet on, if they hit another one, nobody's going to lose their life. But that's happened. I mean, we lost Pistol Pete down in Mexico, got hit out in the sand dunes by a guy, and they had all their harnesses on in Pistol's 4-seater. The other guy did not, and he got ejected. But he punched the door right where Pistol was at. It didn't matter if he had a belt or helmet or Hans device on or anything. And 60 miles an hour into the side of a UTV, not a good thing.
And it's just like, and the other thing is wheeling East Coast, wheeling Texas, out West, they're all different. And like, so I took my family, went out to Glamis for the first time, and I rented a 4-seat Can-Am turbo side-by-side. And like, I thank God that I rented and didn't have my own stuff out there, because everything that I wheel here and like what I'm used to was close enough to Glamis to get me in deep trouble. And like, I know I'd be wadded up in about 15 minutes out there if I hadn't rented and had somebody say, don't do this, and don't do this. And that comes back to like where our guidance is and having those do's and don'ts.
Yeah. Glamis is huge. There's no fake sand dunes out there.
No, there isn't.
I've had some close calls out there.
Yeah. And like the thing that like for me was the whoops. Like, we've been in Johnson Valley and you see whoops and you're hammering down. You don't think about like the wind making a ramp and a 15-foot drop on the other side. Like, but you do there.
Yes. Yeah, there's a technique to driving sand dunes. Shelly and I staff the Rebel Rally, and we always every year we end in Glamis with a day and a half of competition in Glamis. And then before that, they'll typically take the girls through a couple of smaller sets of sand dunes. And then all of a sudden you get to Glamis, and it's just miles upon miles of just quarter mile. It almost seems like a half a mile tall sand dune that's, undercut. It's like, how does that happen in sand?
Yeah.
It's almost like a snow cornice. If you don't know how to drive the sand dunes, stay out of the big stuff. I mean.
What's the big hill out there? Cadillac,
yep.
Yeah. So I remember we went out
Oldsmobile.
there. Oldsmobile, that's it. Oldsmobile.
Yeah. Cadillac is the Rubicon.
Gotcha. And we were out there and we were looking for that and obviously found it. And I remember looking back at camp, and you pretty much see camp, but you can't get there a straight line. It's constant and it's like, holy moly. It's just so different, and it's unique and cool.
Yeah. One of the things with the Rebel is at the end of the day, competition day, as the girls have all gone through and done the checkpoints they're supposed to do in order, and we start to clear them, one of my jobs is always to go out and pick up the checkpoints. To get to some of those checkpoints, all I have is a dot on a GPS screen. It's like, okay, we'll start straight toward it. And then all of a sudden you're backtracking and trying to go to the left, trying to go to the right, trying to figure out, where round or through that next bowl, drop into a witch's eye. And then like, okay, do I have the horsepower to get out? And that's always exciting. I enjoy it much more than Shelly does. She's getting better. This last year, I bought a Raptor, a 2012 Raptor, and we took that on the Rebelle instead of my Jeep. We ended up at the sand dunes again, and now I actually have something that has power and comfort and is built for, because that six cylinder straight six 4-liter in the Cherokee does not even come close. Over 2 times the horsepower in the Raptor and the gearing and everything else. And I started to point it to one of the sand dunes because I knew what I needed was on the other side. And I saw this little ridge between 2 pockets, and I'm going to shoot that ridge. And she was like, "No, you don't," and she was convinced I was trying to kill her. So we took an extra 20 minutes and drove all the way around the sand dune to go get the checkpoint. But I love the sand dunes as much as I do the rock trails. And probably for my style of wheeling, I'm not a hardcore beat your stuff up. I like to go on scenic trips or like on the Rubicon, where I can camp out and enjoy a river or something like that. But the sand dunes is that time to, to open it up and haul the mail. But you got to do it smart.
Yeah, right. And the Raptor sounds cool doing it.
Yes.
Yeah,
it sure does.
Love that sound.
Especially the 6.2s, the twin turbo, new generation, smaller motors. They may have a top speed that rivals the 6.2, but there's no replacement for displacement.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
It's too much fun. So what are the plans that you have for the future? Is there anything works in the park to expand, or any other amenities that you're going to add, or anything that's down the road that is on the waiting list that you want to let people know?
So right now we're always trying to be up to something, and try innovation is the big thing. So right now what we're doing is we're adding into our campground. We're putting in, because the motorhomes are getting bigger, longer, all that kind of stuff. So we're adding 28 new 50 amp sites to accommodate that. That's one of our big things that we're working on here this year. We did just buy another 162 acres. So we're doing some different things with that. So we don't have a lot of acreage. I mean, we're not like a park that's got, 50,000 acres or nothing like that. So we try to utilize, our space is a lot different. It's not like designated trails is like we were talking about. It's more like a spider web, as you're familiar with. We get a lot of mileage out of smaller areas. So part of what we've done is we've bought some more property, and we're trying to basically make it where we can section offset areas. So one of the big events that we're trying to get in different types of events that are kind of related. So one of the cool ones, it's called the Axo Fest, which is like an RC car event. They do them out west, out California is one of the biggest ones. So we got one of those scheduled for this year. So a lot of our customers already like doing that stuff. And then you got bring in a different user group. And then with the extra space, we bought some farm fields around us so that we can have parking and infrastructure for those kind of events. So those are the kind of things that we're really trying to head towards.
Did you pick up that field that was right off of the park, or right off of the RV section?
Yes.
We
just got that.
Awesome.
Yep.
That's great.
So that's 30 acres of just grass. So it used to be a field, obviously, but it's all grass now, or we're grassing it, and like we use it for remote parking, and then so like rock crawling stuff. Hopefully we get back into that, but like instead of having such big distances between our infrastructure, now we have closer areas to do it.
Excellent. Glad to hear that. we may have to revisit you.
Yeah, I would love having you. It's been awesome through the years, as we said. I mean, definitely a
Yeah.
blast.
Yeah, because it's always been hard to try to set up the gate and control people and park people and everything and get people out there for events. But now that you have that field out there, that's handy. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else that you want to touch on? Any favorite story that you have from back in the days of rock crawling, where whether it's like I know you already mentioned Tiny, but is there one of those? I don't know if you heard Charlie's interview.
No.
Okay, well, Charlie's interview aired last week, and this week it's Ranch Pratt is going to air on Thursday. And Charlie, you know how Charlie talks, 100 miles an hour, and a couple of people have messaged me and said, did Charlie even breathe for that hour and a half? I mean, he just went, but he had story after story after story. Is there anything that stands out in your mind? Say something about Charlie even.
Oh, man. So, I've got some doozies. Man, I get you. Yes, I mean, how you want 5, 10, 20 stories?
Just give me a couple really good ones.
Man, one Walker Evans. I remember we were at Supercrawl. Charlie and I were actually on the course, and they had the Matterhorn, and it was just like a straight up and down. Everybody was rolling and getting hurt and all kinds of stuff. So we're in the course beside it. Walker Evans backs up into stops like our course, backs up into the course and hits it. And full Walker Evans style was awesome. Like to see like that moment and the moon buggy and just like that was one of those I will never ever forget. It was just so cool. I remember back at so I'll switch back at the Badlands. It was one of the pro rock events, and it was at Troy Myers. He had bought a property he had later built a house on, and it was totally like almost virgin. I mean, he had wheeled there, and there's some rocks and stuff. But there was this guy, Brian Hamilton, that he used to rock crawl, and just his thing was he was either going to make it or break it. And kind of Chris Durham style, and just smoking the tires, launches the thing out, flips it upside down in the water. I mean, it was crazy. Like, gets undone, everything safe and all that, but just a wild moment. And I remember E-Rock, Chris Durham, just going crazy. He had that scrambler, aluminum-bodied stretch thing, which Charlie actually wound up with years later.
Yeah.
Just smoking the tires and like, Chris Durham, so you're a little, and just watching it bounce up, roll over, get back on its tires. Like moments like that were just awesome. And like, I remember like getting in and we were out at Supercrawl one time. I got 2 quick Charlie stories. And there was this like, I think it was New Mexico. It was like this canyon. Charlie went up, had a pretty violent rollover, blew a tire. It's flat, and there's a video of it. He shoots it, basically gets his whereabouts and grabs himself together with a flat tire. And this is an obstacle that almost nobody was making. Just launches up it with a flat tire, makes it. So that was awesome. And to think of Charlie evolving over the years. I remember one of the first times I met with him, it was an event where everybody likes to think they're hardcore and all that kind of stuff. And this guy, I won't even say his name, had made this trail that nobody can do, right? And it was Charlie and a bunch of guys that he had from New York and this and that. Well, they did this guy's trail in half the time he expected. We never even finished the trail, and this was back at Paragon. So I was there, and I was actually with Charlie with a chainsaw in front of his Jeep finishing the trail with stuff no one had ever made. And he was the first one on, and he had this, because that was kind of the transition in the Top Truck Challenge. He had this big CJ6 yellow and 44s, and it was like a monster truck, but it had 4-wheel steering, and he was wheeling it what a rock crawler is now. It was crazy. So those are the things I love. And Troy Myers, I remember this was back at New Rock. It was one of my last seasons of New Rock, I think it was one of our last events. And Troy had a moon buggy, and it was I think it was either him, Shoop, or Charlie. They were all top. And there was this just crazy obstacle that no one had made. It was a bonus line, and he would have won. He backed up and just tried to launch and Dukes of Hazzard style it, and wound up wadding up his moon bug, and he was like, "Hey, I was going for the win." And just like so many times like that, just love that stuff.
Yeah, those are awesome. Thank you for sharing those. I want to say thank you so much for coming on with us. I'll let you know when we're going to air this. During this COVID thing, I'm trying to get as many of these in the can as I can, and then get them edited and then air them once a week. We'll get things aired. But Kyle, thank you for over the years being such a good friend and being accommodating to our events. I'll need to come and revisit you and see what we can do. For one thing, I miss that really nice steakhouse, the Beef House or whatever it is.
Yeah,
I miss going there.
Yep. And I just want to say thank you. It's an honor to even be asked to do something like this. So the pleasure is all mine. And likewise, I appreciate all the years of friendship and adventures.
All right. Well, you take care. Say hello to everybody out there for me, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you, buddy. You too.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.